it's Gemma here, and I'm here at Jamie's Food Tube Kitchen today, and this time I'm going to show you guys how to make a really moist, squishy mint chocolate chip layer cake. So this cake is one of my all-time favourite cakes. It's super moist with those lovely chocolate chips in it, and it's got a really fresh minty icing. And this cake is all about height, so we're going to bake 4 layers of cake and then layer it up high with delicious fresh peppermint icing. So I have a big bowl here which has 550 grams of caster sugar. I'm just going to put a sieve over that, and to that I'm going to add 525 grams of plain flour. And next up I'm going to add 95 grams of cocoa powder. And then I have 1.5 teaspoons of bicarbonate of soda, and then lastly 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt. And that just needs to get shuffled through the sieve until it's all in the bowl. And to that I'm going to add 200 grams of dark chocolate chips. And then just using a whisk, I'm going to mix that all together till it's really well combined. So I'm going to just leave that to one side, and now I'm going to mix my wet ingredients together into a separate bowl. So I have 350 millilitres of brewed coffee, and that just goes into the bowl. And then I have 350 millilitres of buttermilk, and that's going to go in as well. And then I have 320 millilitres of vegetable oil. You can use corn oil or sunflower oil if you like, but I'm going to use vegetable oil. And then I've got 5 large free-range eggs, and they're going in as well. And this wouldn't be a very minty chocolate cake if it didn't have mint in it, so I have some peppermint extract here, which smells amazing. I'm going to put 1/4 teaspoon in, it's about 6 drops. And then using my whisk, I'm just going to whisk that all together. I'm not trying to put any air into it, I just want to combine it all. So once that's all mixed together, I'm going to just put it into my dry ingredients and give that a really good stir with my whisk. So my batter is quite loose and very runny, but it has got no lumps apart from obviously the chocolate chips. So that's ready. So I'm just going to have a bit of a clear up and get my tins out. I have 4 8-inch tins here, and I have greased them with vegetable oil and then dusted them with flour so that they don't stick. And I'm going to try really hard to distribute all this batter evenly. All done, sort of, dripping, making a mess. And now these need to be baked at 165 degrees C for 25 to 28 minutes. When you're baking 4 layers at the same time, it's great if your oven has a really good even heat distribution. That way, all your cakes will rise at the same time. My cakes are out of the oven, and I'm just leaving them on the side here to cool down while I get on with making my mint buttercream, which is going to be really delicious. So to start with, in my mixing bowl, I'm going to put 500 grams of unsalted butter, and this is really nice and soft. And I'm going to beat that for 5 minutes until it's really pale and fluffy on quite a high speed. Right, that's looking really nice and fluffy now, and so it's time to add some icing sugar, and I have 1,125 grams of icing sugar, which sounds like a lot, but it's quite a big cake. So I've sifted that, and I'm going to add half of it now and beat for about 3 minutes, and then add the other half. Right, that's nearly ready, but it needs to have some liquid added to it. So I've got myself some whole milk here. I'm going to add 6 tablespoons of that to this little glass. And then I'm going to add 1/2 teaspoon of that peppermint extract again, straight into the milk. And because I want this to also appear minty, I'm going to colour this green. And I'm using a mint green colour paste here. See, it's really super duper thick and concentrated. And I'm going to add about a large pea-sized amount. And then using a little whisk, I'm just going to mix that all through and make sure it's really nicely combined. And once that's all really well mixed, it's time to put it into the buttercream. So I'm just going to put the machine on to a minimum speed and pour that in really slowly. Well, that looks and smells amazing, and it's totally ready, but my cakes are still a little bit warm, so I'm going to wait for these to cool, and I'm going to have a bit of a clear down, and then we'll get decorating. My cakes are nice and cool, so I've got everything that I need, and now I'm gonna start building it up. But the first thing that I need to do is to level and trim my cakes. So I've got a turntable here, which does make things a lot easier, but if you don't have one of these, you can still do this. So starting with one of my cakes, I'm just gonna pop it onto the turntable, and then using a sharp knife or a serrated knife, I'm just going to find the kind of lowest point and level it off as best I can. You can use a cake leveler for this, it does make it a lot easier, but I don't have one today. I've just got this fancy knife. So here we go. So hopefully that is now nice and straight. And if there's any bits that are still a little bit uneven, just take your knife and just lop them off gently, like I'm doing. This is pretty good though. And another thing that I always do when making layer cakes is to get rid of the edges, because the edges which have been in contact with the tin are always a little bit drier than everything else, so I like to get rid of those. So I've got this handy placemat, which is pretty much 7 inches in diameter, which is perfect because it's a little bit smaller. So just find yourself something sturdy and smaller than your cake, and then with a smaller knife, just use that to kind of cut this edgy bit off. So that's one layer done, and I'm just going to put that to one side on a piece of greaseproof paper, and that way when I layer them up on top I can just keep them out of the way and they wouldn't want to stick together. So I'm just going to continue to do that with the other 3 layers. So that's all my cakes nicely leveled and trimmed. I've got quite a lot of crumbs going on here, so I want to get rid of as many crumbs as possible. So I'm just going to clear the decks and then we're going to start icing. Okay, so it's time to start building up my cake, and the first thing that I'm going to need is a cake board. You don't have to use a cake board, you could do this directly onto a cake stand or a plate, but I'm going to use a cake board because it just makes it really easy to handle, and also it's super duper straight. So I've got an 8-inch cake board here, which is obviously now slightly bigger than my cake. That goes onto my turntable, and the first thing I need to do is to put a bit of icing onto that so it keeps the cake in place. And then grab your first layer and just pop it right in the middle of that board. Give it a little push down. So I've got my spatula here. I'm going to put a fairly generous amount of buttercream right into the middle of my layer cake, even a bit more. And then I've got here a cranked palette knife. This is a small cranked palette knife. You can do this with a straight palette knife, which is like this, but the crank actually makes it really much easier, because that way you're not like dragging your knuckles through your nice smooth icing. So just use that to gently edge it all over the cake. So I've got a nice thick layer of buttercream and it's lovely and even, and now I'm going to add some extra chocolate chips. So I have some dark chocolate chips here. I'm just going to scatter a small amount through this cake. And then it's time for the next layer, and the weight of the next layer will push those chocolate chips down so that they're in line with the rest of it. And because I trimmed using the same template, this should all line up really nice and evenly, but you might need to just give it a little push here and there just to make sure it's nice and straight. And then just do the same thing all over again. And now it's time for the last layer, so just gently put that on top. Right, it looks pretty cool as it is, but obviously we've got a little way to go before it looks perfect. And I'm now going to do what's called a crumb coat, and that is going to lock in all these loose crumbs so that when it comes to doing the final decoration, I'm not going to be dragging dark brown crumbs through my nice green icing. So what I'm going to do is, using a straight and quite a big palette knife, I'm going to just smooth on some icing, but it doesn't need to be neat and tidy, so don't worry too much if you've got any kind of grooves that you've made with your palette knife, just as long as it's nice and all the crumbs are locked in. Looking pretty good. So now this just needs to go into the fridge for at least half an hour, and what that will do is it will make all the butter go slightly firm, so it means you've got a nice firm and sturdy base to decorate your cake with. So my cake has been chilling and it's nice and firm, which means it's got a perfect base to decorate with. So I'm just going to start by grabbing a big blob of that icing on this palette knife and just doing the same thing but making it thicker. So if you see any bits where you can see the cake through the icing that you've put on, you just need to apply a little bit more so that you can be sure there's no cake being seen through your icing. So I'll smooth that out in a little bit. I'm just going to put some more on the top first. Okay, I think that is looking pretty good. You can kind of go to town with this and you end up scraping it all off and putting it all back on again, but at some point you have to accept that you're not going to get any better than this. So I'm going to leave it there. And now I'm going to make this look really, really pretty by adding extra chocolate chips, because it's a chocolate chip, mint chocolate chip cake. And also I've got these crystallized mint leaves. So all I did here was brush on some whipped white egg white with a brush. And then I just dredged it with sugar and left them to dry overnight. And I'm going to use these to just kind of put on the sides and on the top. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I really enjoy making this cake. It's got two of my favourite flavours combined, the mint and chocolate, which I love. So let me know how you get on in the comments box below, and do send your pictures via Twitter using the hashtag #LoveYourKitchen.